This is a Bay Original podcast.
Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of Kokka Tales. My name is Nicole Galea and I'm here today with Steven Bajada to talk all about sustainability. Hello Steven.
Good morning.
So, to kind of kick things off, a little bit of an introduction to who Steven is. You are a medical student.
Yes.
So, how is that? I'm pretty sure medicine is quite a tough course to be in.
Yes. It is not that easy to juggle everything, but I try my best. So I am now in my fourth year of medicine, and that's it really.
Fourth year, almost there. Last year.
I should graduate in around a year and a half now.
That's great. It's something to look forward to.
Very much so.
So above and beyond you being essentially studying for a doctor, you're also a very big student activist. And one of your main focuses has always been kind of sustainability. Can you kind of give us a little bit of a history into what got you into activism, where you are now, and kind of your journey with all of that?
Okay, sure. So I am 22, and I would say I first was exposed to activism from around 16, 17. Because at that point in time, I used to attend a lot of public speaking and debating courses, which trained me, or at least helped to train me to where I am today.
That's quite an early age as well.
So I kind of start early.
That's nice. Very early age.
I would say my activist journey, it really started a few years back. First, I was quite active in the Medical Student Association.
Nice.
And for a while I was the policy director. So with some other students we wrote a policy paper on climate change. Great. And also one on domestic violence, which did expose me to a different field.
Yeah.
And then after that process, for a while I was active in Extinction Rebellion Malta, because I felt that we really needed to increase our ambition as a country in terms of climate action and sustainability. And now I'm part of the National Youth Council KNZ, where I serve as the director for climate change and sustainability.
A very long journey.
So it's been kind of, every year I've been active, the role changes a bit.
Exactly. How was that going kind of from a medical field into a policy field? Because you kind of have both now, technically.
It's a learning curve. But I think one of the nicest things about it is that you expose yourself to a lot of people from different backgrounds, and you can learn so much.
Yeah.
And ultimately, we live in a society facing multiple problems, and I think there's always this desire to contribute.
Yeah.
And the more you know, the more you can contribute.
Yeah, for sure. And how do you kind of juggle that? Because as we said, the medical field is quite a tough course to be in. And activism takes a lot of time. So I can imagine it's quite hard to juggle both at the same time, especially during exam periods, but then something comes up and you're like, oh no, I need to write a policy about that. How does it kind of work for you?
I mean, it is not the easiest thing to do, let me be honest. A lot of my time has to be dedicated to studying for my medical exams, and ultimately I want to be a good doctor, so the more practice, the more experience, the more exposure I have, the better.
Yeah.
So the way I see it, it's three things. A, you have to prioritize. B, you have to be quite strong in the sense that you have to avoid distractions. And in our society, there are a lot of distractions.
My phone is the number one distraction, so I get it.
And coffee, I would say, is the third thing. Lots and lots of coffee.
Coffee is life. Coffee is quite life. I will be the first one to admit that. So, as you mentioned, kind of your first policy was climate change. And I think the movements you went through kind of throughout your life led you more so to climate change and sustainability as a topic of conversation. Was it that policy that kind of drove you into loving climate change and sustainability? Or maybe was it something prior to it that kind of led you in?
I think it was prior to it. So a few years back, I mean, I have to thank my educators at school and my parents, because I had geography at school and I loved geography. I loved it to pieces. Yeah. And we had a very good teacher, and he kind of instilled that passion in us.
We had environmental studies and the same thing happened. I remember studying the greenhouse gases and kind of the process of it all. It was really interesting at the time.
So I think that's where it kind of... And plus as a kid, I used to read National Geographic magazines and watch National Geographic. So from an early age, I took an interest in the field. Then like the more you know, the more you take an interest.
Exactly. Love kind of followed you around
so
in various ways.
And my parents also. I mean, I have a good relationship with my mom, and normally we go out for hikes on the weekend together. And in the past, she would kind of explain, like, look at that plant, look at that animal. And now I kind of tell her, look at that plant, look at that animal.
The roles have changed.
So kind of, it's both my educators, my parents, and even amongst my friends, like, we're all quite passionate about the field.
Yeah.
So we love to go for hikes together, for example.
Amazing. I think it's quite a growing trend within the youths as well to kind of care about the climate and care about sustainability and thrive kind of for a better future, if not for us, then for the people coming after us, I guess. So does your course help you in any way when it comes to climate policy or climate change, activism and all of that?
It is, the link is indirect. So we know that climate change is going to have direct and indirect effects on healthcare.
Yeah.
Direct effects will come about through heat waves, storms, droughts. And then the indirect effects are going to be the complications climate change brings to society. So for example, if because of a series of severe droughts, the price of food increases, that might change what people can eat, and in the long term that can have some health consequences.
Yeah.
So there is a link, and sometimes we have some lectures on public health and it's kind of mentioned in passing. So at times it is brought up. Where medicine helps me, I think, is the work ethic you have to study
Comes
and then
into it a little
transfer
bit.
into other fields. So I think that's where medicine helps me, because like I know I have to work hard, and you kind of transfer it on.
Yeah, you kind of bring in the studying need that you kind of have for medicine. Obviously, climate change, it's a tough topic to discuss. There's so much loose ends and discussions to be had about it. But do you think there are specific topics of conversation or policy advancements that you kind of really believe they are needed to kind of move towards the next step in becoming sustainable at some point?
I mean, in science, there's always the expression, and in medicine in particular, you stand on the shoulders of giants.
Yeah.
So we need to thank all the scientists who have told us where our emissions are coming from and who have proposed many solutions to different fields.
Yeah. The IPCC reports are so ridiculously in depth.
So like, we know all this.
Yeah.
What has been lacking is political will to actualize some of the recommendations, which, yes, involve change. So you're always going to get winners and losers will push back hard. For specific areas, what's good about climate change from a healthcare perspective is that a lot of the climate actions bring healthcare benefits. So if you decarbonize your energy source, so from coal, oil or gas, you go on to renewables, solar, wind, so on, you cut air pollution, leading to less cases of cardiorespiratory disease.
Okay.
So it's good that these things tend to link. And the main sectors you have to focusing on Malta, and it relates to most of the world: energy, transport, building and construction, and waste.
Which I guess we can say we have a lot to work on. I guess.
And then land use. It's those 5 sectors cover most sources of emissions.
Do you think that solar energy can sustain Malta as the primary source of energy currently? Or in the future, should we add more investment into it?
We should definitely continue to invest in it. Because of the competition for roof space and our limited land mass, around 10 to 15, max 16, 17% of Malta's energy can be derived from solar energy. Right now it's about 9%. So there is room to grow.
For sure.
But experts have suggested that, unfortunately, due to limitations, it is unlikely that all Malta can be powered by solar. There is the potential for future technologies which can improve the efficiency of current systems.
Right, including solar panels
Including solar panels. And offshore systems. So offshore floating solar panels or solar farms could become a thing in the future. And something which already exists in other parts of the world, offshore wind. It is expected that in the upcoming future, so next few years or decade or so, we will build, perhaps in partnership with Italy or Greece, an offshore wind farm, which will then provide quite a substantial chunk of energy.
Which makes sense as well, because, correct me if I'm wrong, but most of the infrastructure we have currently does not support solar panels. So, for example, in an apartment complex, it's very hard to have a solar panel or a group of solar panels that will sustain the entire block, even with the way kind of the energy is divided and works in Malta. So something like that might need to be mandatory in a way.
There are, again, this then relates to urban planning and policy rules. There are current issues with solar rights, because if you invest in solar panels, but in your area you can build higher, and someone then builds and shades your solar panels, that is an issue currently, which has to be addressed. For Malta, so that's energy is about 1/3 of our carbon emissions. The next biggest sector is transport.
I think we can all relate to being stuck in traffic at 8 a.m. being like, I am not leaving here alive.
And ultimately, the island, to decarbonize, we have a plan, the Low Carbon Development Strategy, and a binding target that by 2050 we have to hit net zero.
Which is quite difficult, considering what we're seeing so far and kind of the little advancements that have happened so far. It's quite a big target to reach.
I mean, if we take climate action seriously, then it is nothing less than the transformation of society.
Yeah.
Like, that has to be emphasized. So, like, tinkering at the edge helps, but you have to do a lot more.
Do you think that electric cars are the way to go, or is it more so emphasizing public transport and its use and efficiency so that more people make use of it?
They all help. Yeah. They all help. But I like to look at policy solutions that are cheap, easy, and can be implemented quickly.
Yeah.
So when it comes to electric cars, right now the government is offering a grant of 11,000 euros, which is high to very high by European standards. So credit for that. But the road network is what it is. Land use is what it is.
Yeah.
And do you want Malta to become a series of highways, or do you want it to be a set of livable cities?
Yeah, exactly.
So electric cars help, but they're not going to be the panacea for climate action.
For sure.
Hence why you need a lot more investment in public transport, in walkability, in pedestrianizing areas.
Yeah.
And ultimately, if people walk more, they cut their emissions. It's a very cheap mode of transport, and you improve their health.
And I think even something as simple as bike lanes, which can be implemented and made use of more. Because I could tell from a lot of people that I know, they are more than willing to bike to certain areas. But the infrastructure isn't there to make them feel even safe to do it. We're quite not great drivers in Malta, sorry to say, but as in you're scared to go on a bicycle on the road, you know?
I don't blame people for not using a bike if the infrastructure is extremely hostile to everyone not in a car.
Yeah.
Because that is a design issue. So it has to be solved through changes in design. I take inspiration a bit from the mayor of Paris, Anne Hidalgo. Paris, in the past 3 years, the city centre has been revolutionized in favor of pedestrians and bicycle lanes.
Yeah.
It has transformed how people relate to the city in a very healthy way.
And kind of made it a staple of certain areas. So take, for example, Amsterdam, Paris, it's become kind of the norm that if you go there, you're going to use a bicycle, you know?
And even, in Malta, even if we look at Valletta, before it was pedestrianized, we had a situation where St. George's Square and where Parliament is today were two big car parks. Republic Street was a highway. Merchant Street was a highway. Now Valletta is constantly full of people.
Yeah.
And it's been beneficial to businesses, it's been beneficial for the environment, and it's brought back life into the city.
And you got used to it as well. It becomes a norm for society that if you go to Valletta, you're going to park a little bit far away, but you're going to walk and you're going to have a nice kind of chill walk towards your restaurant or wherever you kind of want to go.
So this is a very important aspect of linking climate action to urban planning to transport are extremely important.
While also taking into consideration anything that you need to kind of think about, whether that's disability access or anything like that.
Exactly. And then with land use, land use is always going to be a big problem in Malta because the land is very limited.
Yes.
So I understand it's difficult to say, okay, that area is residential, that's industrial, that's healthcare related, so on.
And to kind of add to the fire in a way, most of land is for farm use then. So it's not even natural, untouched land, which I guess is necessary at the end of the day as well.
But I mean, at least we have, I mean, through the EU LIFE projects, like if you look at Busquet has been regenerated.
Yes, it has.
And there are other
Extensively.
areas which are currently being regenerated or can be regenerated. So there's also another climate action which can be implemented.
As part of KNZ, you went to COP.
Yes.
And we're kind of talking a little bit about it outside, but I
Yes.
guess we're going to have to rehash the discussion we had outside.
A bit.
How was it like? What did you see there? And did you kind of see any inspirational speech or person that really kind of hit you hard when you were there?
COP was eye-opening. I think my inspiration was partly, I would say, what struck me the most were at the events I attended at COP. It was me and my colleague Nigel Carwana were at COP.
Hi, Nigel.
And indigenous communities did, I think, open my eyes the most because they're on the front lines and to them it's very personal.
Yeah, it's their family as much as...
It's their family, it's their home, it's their livelihood. So they did open my eyes quite a bit, and members or representatives from small island states in the Pacific, because ultimately climate change of more than 2 degrees is a death sentence for their community. So they speak with a lot of passion, a lot of energy, and they're really fighting.
Yeah. I think sometimes it's a bit of a surreal reality for us, the idea that 2 degrees can be so much worse or it's such a bad thing for it to happen. But for these people, it's like they won't exist if that happened.
I did at a point I did feel a bit sad, to be honest, because there was an exhibition on sea level rise, and I knew sea level rise was happening. I knew it was going to happen, but the climate has already warmed by 1 degree.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize that there is quite a delay of a few decades between when the temperature rises to when you get the sea level rise effect because of it.
Yeah.
So something which I learned at COP was that because of a climate change of +1, already the sea will rise by 50 centimeters by 2100. That is locked in. And by 2 meters by 2200. Yeah. So that is going to happen irrespective of what we do. What can still change is above that. How much more will the sea level rise?
How much worse can it get?
And
considering we're an island, we also need to take that into consideration.
We have to take this into account, because the realization is a sea level rise of 50 centimeters means most of our beaches will be gone or erode by half.
Yeah.
Some infrastructure along the coast will be underwater. So we have to adapt to it, or ideally not invest in that area in the knowledge that in a few decades that area is not suitable. So that also struck me quite a lot at COP. And the whole process, because it's the world meets, discusses, debates. Part of it is a ritual. So in the first 2 days, world leaders met, 190 speeches. 100 of them say more or less the same thing.
We need to fight for climate change, do more.
It's not like we're in power talking like we're activists, but anyway. But kind of, it's a ritual. It has a role, a frustrating role, but it has a role.
Yeah.
And some countries did go there, improve their ambition, but we're nowhere near where we need to be.
Yeah.
And there's a group, they're called Climate Action Tracker. And they review all the pledges, all the commitments, all the climate plans.
How much they're maintained, kept.
And kind of what impact does it make? And it's, with current plans, the world will warm by 3 degrees by 2100.
Which is already beyond what we think should be kept at.
The Paris Agreement, the aim is to limit it to 1.5.
Which is already increased to 2.
So, and then with the new pledges made, a few years ago it went from 3 to 2.7. With the pledges made in Glasgow, it went from 2.7 to 2.4. But remember, these are pledges.
Exactly. This is the interesting thing with COP, that I kind of, as I was following it, it kept hitting me over and over and over again, especially when I was doing my dissertation. Everything that is said doesn't necessitate action or that it would be done in the future. Paris showed it clearly. So the idea that you're hearing all these pledges and agreements and ideas and you're like, okay, that's great, that's amazing, but where's the backing that makes me, or that reassures me that this is going to happen and that maybe I can relax a little bit and be like, okay, there's movement towards that goal. It's there's always that black hole.
Ultimately, implementation rests with member states.
Yeah.
So there's always that. I mean, these COPs, they have a purpose, they have a role, they signify climate action, and they give at least the impression that momentum is something is happening. And I mean, at COP, probably the most important thing was that millions or billions or trillions of dollars in finance were mobilized for climate-related projects.
Which is great.
So that's great. So that really helps going forward. But a lot of issues remain. I mean, like at COP, for example, something that happened, which is it signifies the COP process. For the first time, fossil fuels were mentioned in the final declaration. That hadn't happened before. But the way they were mentioned was the UK presidency wanted it to be specifically phase out. The compromise was phase down.
Okay.
Which begs the question...
Which is essentially exactly what we're doing right now.
It's phase down to what? From what?
Exactly.
So
There's no direct... There's no... It's so vague.
And it's just rubbish around language, really and truly.
Exactly. Which sadly sometimes these things naturally happen when it comes to policies and discussions and all of that stuff, especially when you're talking about change that needs to happen globally, not just in one area. But I think what we were talking about outside as well, what's so great about COP and everything that came out of it was kind of the activism that arose from it. You know, during COP you had youth activists outside and beyond youth activists as well, protesting and showing the need for change and advancement. So it kind of shows the impact activists have and kind of how we can hold them accountable in our own ways and kind of make sure that at least what they're being said, you know, we remember what he said last time. We're not going to forget it, you know what I mean?
I mean, sometimes people, generally older people, but even some young people, they like, youth activism doesn't have a role, it doesn't have an impact. I'm like, no, it has a very strong impact. Yeah. Just temper your expectations, because don't expect that if you speak out on an issue today, tomorrow the world will change just because you said it. But
it takes time and dedication.
It takes time, it takes a lot of effort. But when it comes to climate change, the most important outcome that youth activism has currently already delivered is that the window of ambition has shifted completely. A few years ago, the thought of net zero was seen as crazy green environmentalist hippie.
Yeah.
Tree huggers galore. Now it is the standard policy of most developed countries and some developing countries.
And it's frowned upon if you don't have it in reality, even when it comes to more kind of company-wise. Most companies and most kind of irrelevant of government entities are focused more... Your corporate
social responsibility has to have something green in it.
Exactly. There's a stronger need for corporate to have their own conscious and sustainable outcomes from their own mission, kind of. It's not just a governmental standpoint, it's also a personal, it's also a corporate one now.
So that has been a very significant shift. And if we had to look at the EU, I mean, the Greta effect did have a big impact, because Fridays for Future was really big in the EU.
Yeah.
And the EU's policy, we had the targets of minus 40% for 2030. They were upgraded quite strongly because of all the protesting to minus 55% by 2030. So that had a policy change, which is quite significant.
Exactly. At the end of the day, I guess politics and governments, they want to get votes. They want to get people on their side. So if you show a certain movement and power within a dialogue, it's kind of in their favor to actually do something about it.
And it does shift. I think the most important role of an activist in the environmental field is if you are able to shift what a politician sees as possible, that's a big win.
Exactly.
And that will deliver the change you are hoping for, at least get you partly there.
For sure.
And that's a small victory.
Exactly. So obviously COVID-19 affected everything.
Yes.
And I guess climate change as well was affected by COVID-19. How did you kind of see its effects?
So COVID-19 led to a short, sharp drop in emissions. But the drop is temporary.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, if the fundamentals behind your emissions remain the same, so let's say emissions are because you have an oil-powered fuel station. Odds are it's still an oil-powered fuel station. So, okay, you turn it a bit down. Now the amount has gone back up, you turn it back up.
Exactly.
So
Cars are back on the road.
Cars are back on the road.
Airplanes are back in action.
So, really and truly, again, emissions fell by 7-8% for about a year. last year they went back up by 5-6%. So we're more or less
back to
at
square
the
one.
same place we were.
So a lot of people kind of give emphasis on activism and all of that. What do you think the youths can do to kind of give their part on not just climate change, on activism in general?
I would say the most important point is to be active, to come to events, to come to workshops, come to protests, make your voice heard. Ultimately, an election is coming soon, and you will get politicians will come ask you, do you want anything? What do you think of A, B, and C? Tell them what you really feel and what you really think.
I think we do not understand how powerful our voice is. I think we really should work on not being afraid to speak our minds. If you make a mistake, everyone makes a mistake, you know? As long as you're humble enough to understand you made a mistake and then move forward with it, that's completely fine. But give your opinion, like, give your thoughts on an idea, learn more about it. Like, your voice really does matter in reality.
I mean, there's a lot of power in being a youth, if you know how to use it.
Yeah.
So, like, my advice would be, irrespective of whether it's climate change, or maybe you want to focus on gender-based violence or other issues that are prominent in society now, get out there, try. At most, you're not going to succeed, but you still tried.
So you already mentioned how the indigenous community really like hit you at COP, but do you have kind of a specific person that you really look up to, the way they speak, the way they present themselves, the way they address a situation?
I would say that this person would be my brother, actually. My brother Steven Bajada. Hi. if you're watching. He is a Paralympian, a lawyer, and a Cambridge graduate.
Wow, well done.
So I do look up to him. There is a bit of slight competition between us.
It's healthy. Siblings always have that competition.
It's healthy competition.
It's healthy competition. My brother and I have it too. And he's younger, so I have to step up.
So I'd say my brother does inspire me quite a lot.
Perfect. Now we're going to end it off with a kind of quick fire round. So just blurt out the first answer that comes to mind.
Okay.
So your age,
22.
already mentioned it. Best place traveled?
Ooh, Czech Republic.
No. Interesting. Okay.
Czech Republic.
Wow. Okay. Best sustainable swap?
As in?
For example, the wax wraps instead of plastic wraps.
I have one. Walk instead of drive.
Okay. Very efficient. You don't need to buy anything for it. Easy swap. So, winter or summer?
Summer.
Nice. Favorite study spot?
Cafes.
Agreed. They have the best coffee, so it's always good to study there. Most influential person?
Greta.
Very good choice, to be fair. Favorite song?
It's a bit embarrassing, but during exams I tend to find a new music genre, and for some reason I discovered French pop.
Wow. Okay, how specific.
So probably some French pop song.
Nice. Favorite movie?
Lord of the Rings.
Fair. It's classic. Cats or dogs?
Dogs.
Nice. Thank you so much for being here. It was a really nice discussion, super interesting. I hope it kind of inspires you guys to be more activists and kind of take note on climate change and sustainability. And I'll see you all in the next one. Bye.
This is a Bay Original Podcast.